When Gran Turismo released in Japan at the end of 1997 and 1998 for us Westerners, it achieved the impossible. A racing game which ditched the casual arcade approach, instead focusing on delivering a driving style built upon the basic concepts of real-life driving. Along with more than 100 licensed cars with fairly accurate models for the modest PlayStation, this combination proved to be a surprise hit, becoming the most sold game for the PlayStation. Their developers, Polyphony Digital, had to release a sequel. Given this first release took 5 years to develop, one would expect them to add a bit of extra content and call it a day. In fact, nobody would have blamed them, but things were different. In the words of Kazunori Yamauchi, I quote, "I made Gran Turismo 1 for Japan, with mostly Japanese cars. I am making Gran Turismo 2 for the world." Let these words set the stage for the following review, as I take you on a ride through one of the most ambitious racing games ever released. In order to create a racing game with worldwide reach, Polyphony had to step outside the Japanese car market and bring new brands to their side. There was a little problem though. Some manufacturers were licensed by other publishers for their games, and from my own assumption, since I never seen one of these agreements by myself, certain publishers introduced exclusivity clauses in their agreements, meaning certain brands couldn't issue licenses to anyone who was willing to pay them. There's nothing Polyphony could do about it. These brands wouldn't be on Gran Turismo 2. Brands such as Porsche, Lamborghini and Ferrari, the big names which draw the attention of most people, were tied up in Need for Speed. The car featured in the cover, the McLaren F1? Forget about it. All you'll get is 1,000 schoolyard rumors on how to get one, including buying 99 black cars and having it magically appear on your garage, filling the final slots. Problems weren't over even if they got the manufacturer to accept, as some cars could be licensed by another studio, such as the Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR, which was under EA at the time, forcing Polyphony to remove it from its final release. It was a challenge for Polyphony, as many looked down on Gran Turismo for missing these brands or exotic cars, an issue solved with a different approach. These competitors with well-known brands usually had less than 20 cars available for the player, a number which looks pathetic compared to the cars available in the first Gran Turismo, and the gap will be even bigger by the second, with a list of cars featured which is impressive even today, let alone by its number, but the brands featured. Starting with Roof, a manufacturer with an excellent story and a near absurd level of exclusivity, was introduced to an entire generation in Gran Turismo 2. The same could be said about Venturi, a French manufacturer which tried to rival Ferrari, and their cars have reached a near legendary status, being surrounded by mystery due to their small production runs. However, they fall short to Vector, an American manufacturer which produced 50 cars in its entire lifespan, let alone Lister. You know how many of these things were built? 4. These brands were introduced to a new generation who will wonder about them for years, becoming dream cars for some of us. I mean, maybe the name of my channel is a hint. I am aware that I might be part of a minority, because your dream cars reside in East City. Gran Turismo was responsible for introducing Japanese sport cars to most of the world, and for the second game it only got bigger. Your first car in Gran Turismo is usually Japanese, unless you're crazy enough to start with the Fiat 500.
Oh god, just stop thinking about it, it's not worth your time.
With multiple options to choose, one can buy a car from a brand and progress through their ranks. Your first Nissan Silvia can lead to a GTR, your MX-5 to an RX-7. These cars offer excellent performance for an affordable price, which made most of us drive them and search through their used car lots for hours, searching for the next special car. While some of us have a lot of nostalgia for this situation, there are some who consider this Japanese bias a problem. While it has become a problem in future releases, I can't say the same about Gran Turismo 2. It's probably the only game in the franchise which succeeded at creating a worldwide roster. I am confident at the time of release, one could go out and see multiple cars which were featured in the game. It didn't matter if you were in America or Europe, you could buy these cars parked in your front door. And sure, maybe a Neon or Corsa aren't the most desirable cars, but no other game allowed you to race these ordinary cars, let alone make them more viable through upgrades. Their stock figures are irrelevant as each car is a platform to be modified, and they really make a difference. A car with a few performance upgrades is quicker and able to challenge the next tier of opponents. A feature which adds more immersion to the experience is how every upgrade has its own description, even if most of them are rather pointless. In some of them they just gave up. Such is the case of the final stage of weight reduction, Stage 3, where it just says Stage 2 taken a step further. Yeah, thanks, really useful. The most outstanding option comes in the shape of racing modifications, which allows you to turn street cars into race cars, some of them based off real race cars. This is a feature which really needs to come back into the franchise. I know it's impossible, but it's so brilliant. Even more so when most cars in the game do have this option. While performance upgrades are important, the magic happens with specific setups. One can fine-tune the suspension of each car to modify its handling, along with limited slip differentials and gear ratios. However, there's a catch. These features are slightly broken. If one raises the rear right height and lowers the front, the game believes the car is going downhill and increases acceleration. And yes, it's a noticeable boost. Another broken feature comes with gear ratios. One can perform a specific trick which allows both for better acceleration and higher top speeds than possible with normal means. I will provide a guide made by T-Kanji which explains this curious glitch, among being an excellent guide to progress through the game. Now, the irony of a game which calls itself the real driving simulator and manages to be broken isn't lost on me. However, the main physics do behave as they should. We have to thank them for teaching millions of players to use the brakes before a corner. One has to account for understeer and oversteer, and take the right lines or lose time. For Gran Turismo 2, a few quirks present in the original Gran Turismo were fixed. It's hard to describe the handling of the first title in a few words, but I say it's dominated by the exaggerated impact of weight transfer. It's not rare to slide while braking on a straight line with faster cars, by example. It's really easy to start drifts which are rather hard to correct and might end up in a full-blown spin. These issues seem to be caused by the way Gran Turismo reacts to each input. All of these quirks were solved in Gran Turismo 2. It all feels more polished. Cars don't lose control while braking, and it's rather hard to spin out personally. Sure, one might say it leans towards arcade, but braking zones, racing lines and some level of throttle control is still required to have a good pace. If there's something which stands out, is the bias towards understeer most cars have, and this is a problem which the franchise has suffered for multiple entries. In Gran Turismo 2 is not as strong as future games, but one can trace the beginning of this trend to this very game. I feel it was a design choice to create a more forgiving driving experience, and somewhat correct the loose handling from the previous release. As another curious note, we have simulation tires, which in theory provide a more realistic experience in big quotation marks. They render most cars undrivable, as they slide around without an ounce of grip. However, I will admit they make braking feel slightly more realistic, as one has to brake way earlier or miss the turn. Also, I could feel the slight lockup effect while turning in, which doesn't appear with any other set of tires. At least they aren't forced upon you by the game, which I'm grateful for. One thing we are forced to do, however, are license tests, 50 of them. A special mention for the International C license, which never came back to the franchise. These tests are made to teach different players how to drive inside a racetrack, familiarize them with racing lines and different cars. The Super License makes its first appearance, however it's not required to progress through the game, outside unlocking different tracks in arcade mode, which kind of beats the purpose of having an arcade mode which is supposed to be a straightforward experience, given how all we can do in arcade mode is unlock certain cars which can be bought in simulation mode. It seems like a wasted opportunity to offer two different gaming experiences, something achieved by the previous release of the franchise, by keeping progression in both game modes separated from each other. Anyway, back to licenses. Each time one brings the topic of licenses, it opens a debate with people who love them, and I don't really understand why. I get they are frustrating if one wants to achieve all goals, but getting past with bronze isn't too challenging. One might feel the game is placing an arbitrary roadblock upon the player, but given how none of these tests are challenging, outside those slalom tests, if you can beat them, then you need more practice. Your hard work will be rewarded though with a lot of racing. The best place to start is the Gran Turismo League, which works as a worldwide competition. First, we have the National League, a set of events divided by nations. The fact this is one of the first events for us is intentional, as it does a good job at showcasing the diverse car list. You might say I won't be able to access these events without a car from the respective nation. That sounds expensive. Well, Gran Turismo 2 takes a different approach. Most events have a specific horsepower base restriction. If it's below this horsepower limit, it can race. Simple as. This is a genius move. For one, it acts like a self-imposed difficulty gauge, as more often than not, the AI isn't too tough and you can defeat them with cars well below the supposed base. Hell, in some events they even go past the horsepower restriction and they still manage to be slow, as proven by MattJ155 in this video. Which takes me to my second point. Thanks to the free-for-all nature of these races, you can bring anything to them, which allows you to create all sorts of absurd challenges, just how I play this game on my live streams, like the time I did an endurance race with a Dodge Neon. Once you're done with national events, you unlock European and Pacific leagues. Opponents here are faster, but what matters the most are the prizes. In Gran Turismo 2, most events are under the single race format. You beat said race and get a monetary reward, but in most cases you also get a prize car. These prize cars can be sold for decent money in some cases, given you can earn 250,000 credits in 3 laps with a lot of events. If this was the real economic simulator, we will be in hyperinflation with so much money printing. While I understand this sort of knowledge comes with playing the game for years, you can buy a decent car for 30,000 credits and start trying different events which give you good prize cars. A few minutes of grinding will afford almost every car you want, as they happen to be rather affordable. The most expensive of them peak at 2 million credits, which is nothing compared with the absurd pricing cars have reached in later games. To wrap the Gran Turismo League, we have the GT World Championship, a staple from the franchise where we have to compete against full-blown race cars, the keyword here being championship. In the previous game, all events in GT mode were under a championship structure with different races and point system, while in Gran Turismo 2 there's a total of 3 championships with 5 races each. They make from a nice change of pace from all the single races, until you discover they all have randomized prize cars and it will take multiple attempts to get them all. Once you complete the GT League, the second bulk of events are housed under special events, starting with the classic Sunday Cup, which has been done countless times by a child Yellowbird who bought cars and turned off the console without saving. There's an event for every type of car. I don't think there's any other racing game which allows you to race with multiple station wagons in an oval, luxury sedans in a highway at midnight, gay cars through Rome, muscle cars through Seattle, and race touring cars at Laguna Seca. The fact all of this can be done in the same game was unthinkable in 1999, and it remains impressive to this day, even if I find the tracklist a bit repetitive, while some others are barely used. There's Rome Night, which is one of the most unique racetracks to be featured in Gran Turismo, and it's not featured in a single event, which is a shame because there's over 20 tracks without counting their reverse variations, which also aren't used outside manufacturer events. Oh yes, some brands have specific events for their own cars. They don't offer much, but it's a nice detail and they count towards game completion as well. These take place in a randomized track and reverse layouts can be featured at times. I am sure most of you will be happy with so many races, but we have 2 additional leagues to talk about. The staple of the franchise and my favorite events, endurance races. These have doubled from the original Gran Turismo. We have 7 different events, some oriented towards race cars like the 50 laps of a special stage 5 where different LMPs will be waiting for you, or the 90 laps of Laguna Seca where JGTC cars have taken over for a day. But there's one endurance which is rather special. The 30 laps of Trial Mountain is a shorter race focused on ordinary street cars, only open for cars with less than 295 horsepower. In a way, this event serves as an introduction to the world of endurance racing. It was for me when I first played this game and it got me hooked, even if I kind of cheated using a TBR Chimera which destroys the entire competition. While endurance races are fun, there's one small detail which breaks the entire experience. For some bizarre reason, all tires have the same lifespan, no matter the compound. There's no punishment for choosing the softest tires which offer the most grip, and that kind of breaks the experience as it reduces the amount of pit strategy required to win each race. The last set of events are rally races, which I find the weakest of the bunch. For one, they are set in closed dirt circuits rather than open rally stages, being a single lap against a ghost car of all things, meaning you have to beat a specific time rather than an actual driver. While I do appreciate the effort as there's a good amount of tracks and the cars don't feel bad while driving on dirt, it can get rather tedious to complete these events, as there's not any rewards for doing so, outside a few credits which aren't enough to cover the cost of building a rally car, let alone buying one from a manufacturer. A highlight, however, comes with the inclusion of Pikes Peak in both uphill and downhill directions, a track which hasn't seen a return to the franchise ever since. While all of this content is impressive for its time, Polyphony had a problem while developing Gran Turismo 2. In order to meet its release date for the Christmas season of 1999, Polyphony had to cut corners. As one would expect, a few things went wrong. While one can find the occasional grammar error here and there, it pales in comparison to the machine test glitch, a mode where you can test different cars and set new time records with your own custom name. If one decides to get 9 different records under the same category, you will break the game. For one, your precious garage can suffer 2 different fates, from being completely wiped out without any chances to recover it, to being full of broken glitch cars known as no-name cars. This curious error happens as for some bizarre reason, the game will start overwriting certain values which house our garage data. To make it worse, one can play with different names and move these no-name cars around by pushing the start button. One can complete certain license tests and acquire infinite credits. There's an entire video here on YouTube showing how to exploit this game-breaking bug, which is so satisfying to watch as someone who lost his garage countless times. Another major glitch comes with the opponent lineups of certain events, endurance events to be more specific. Gran Turismo 2 uses a global list of opponents, and each event contains a set of numbers which reference this list, in order for the appropriate opponents to appear. When localizing the Japanese release for the United States, the Shelby GT500 KR was replaced for the standard GT500. It's only a name change, however these two are different cars cars in the game's data. Given the 500 KR wasn't a part of the game, it was removed from the list, leaving an empty space. This missing slot causes the game to choose a car from the event located above the selected one. For example, if one starts the 30 laps of Trial Mountain, it will make the Vector M12 LM edition, which is part of the list of opponents available for the 2 hours of ROM, appear among street cars instead. And I have raced against the M12, it's a really intense race. These bugs were present in the first NTSC release for the North American market, nicknamed NTSC 1.0. Later re-releases fixed these issues, which means there's not a lot of people who experienced them firsthand. Now they are more of a curious note, which shows how rushed Polyphony was to meet each release date. With all the hidden cars which were playable, among fixing different glitches, a project called Gran Turismo 2 Plus has been developed over a few years, fixing flaws and restoring multiple cars which were locked away. I find this is the definitive way of playing this game today, as it just feels like the original, rather than a hardcore modded experience. I will leave a link to it in the description of this video, along with a few codes created by Tailend which improve the game experience, allowing you to play at 60 FPS among other changes. For those who are interested, you won't regret it. There's a reason why I come back to this game so often, nostalgia aside, and that is the fact it offers a unique experience which no other racing game can provide. You are given so much freedom on how to tackle these events, which means every playthrough is different. Yes, people say this all the time about Gran Turismo, but none can match 2 in this aspect. The fact one can choose how challenging the game is by choosing overpowered or underpowered cars provides a degree of freedom which hasn't been seen ever since. While some might see this approach as a bad thing given how unrealistic it can be, I believe it provides a fun experience, and that's what racing games should be about, having fun. Gran Turismo wouldn't be what it is today without fun gameplay. Racing to collect cars and build your dream garage might sound boring, but it's addictive even for someone who doesn't know about cars. Behind the simple gameplay hides a rather complex system, where one can modify and make setups for their own cars, and a racing game which is teaching appropriate techniques in order to progress. These hardcore mechanics aren't forced upon the player, rather hidden away for those who want to dive into this world, and out of the millions who bought Gran Turismo, a lot of them did. The franchise was successful at creating a generation of car enthusiasts. I find this part is missing in many racing games today, as they don't manage to be a gateway for the automotive world, the same way it was for me. While I have to thank Need for Speed Porsche for introducing me to cars and racing games, Gran Turismo 2 taught me how to drive them. By constant trial and error, by grinding each license test until I could pass them, by losing control at the corkscrew time and time again. While playing this game for my review, I feel rather lucky for the experiences Gran Turismo 2 provided for me, over years and years of playing it on a near daily basis. I think you should play it, especially with the Plus mod and Tailend's new codes, which make the game really approachable if one doesn't mind the PlayStation graphics. Whatever you decide to do, I hope you can find a game, or anything really, which provides as much happiness as Gran Turismo 2 did for me. I hope to see you soon. Until next time, bye for now.